You know those games that for some people have a real nostalgic feel, so you decide to play them and instantly regret your decision? That's Millipede for the Nintendo Entertainment System. Millipede is an arcade game released in 1982 by Atari Incorporated and was a sequel to another arcade game, Centipede. It was later ported to the NES in 1988 and was virtually untouched from the original game from what I can tell. The game starts up with the bland title screen we're used to seeing and some simple music. This no-frills opening was the standard on NES, so I didn't expect anything different. Once the game begins, you'll notice that it still looks like an Atari game. With the graphics capabilities of even the 8-bit generation, at least some effort could have been put into the game's graphics to at least make it not so bland. You get a huge black box that's about 3/4 of the screen and a gray area that's about 1/4 of the screen. The gray area can be moved in freely. The goal is to shoot the millipede as it comes from the top of the screen to the bottom. When you shoot the millipede, the piece you shoot becomes what appears to be a lopsided mushroom, and the millipede splits into halves and goes separate directions. It continues to move laterally and come down the screen when it hits a mushroom or the edge of the screen, eventually entering the gray playable area. If it reaches the bottom and goes back up, it will spawn more one-hit millipedes until all are dead. The game uses other insects to change the pace and strategy of the game, like earwigs that will turn a mushroom poisonous that when hit by the millipede will charge towards the bottom of the screen, bees that will lay a vertical line of mushrooms in the way, spiders that bounce erratically all over the gray area, inchworms that when shot will slow all the enemies, beetles that crawl around in the gray area and eventually crawl up the screen, leaving flowers in its path that cannot be shot. Once the millipede hits this flower, the entire play area drops one row. Dragonflies that drop mushrooms in a zigzag pattern on their way down, as well as mosquitoes that drop diagonally and when hit raises everything on the screen up one row. There are DDT bombs, and yes, you heard that correctly, DDT bombs on the screen that when shot will explode to help clear more enemies or mushrooms at one time. There can only be up to 4 of these on the screen at a given time. Everything you shoot and kill except mushrooms awards points. There are intervals in the game where the player will have to face a swarm of enemies instead of a millipede and hope to survive the onslaught. Killing these enemies does have a point stacking effect that increases with each kill. The swarm will only stop when all enemies are killed or you die. There are 2 game choices for single player. Game A starts you out at the lowest level with 0 points, or for those brave enough, you can start on Game B, which starts you out at the same level you would have had to have achieved basically 15,000 points in Game A. Now that you have the game down, let's talk about the grade categories. As I stated earlier, the appearance of the game is horrendous. Most ports have at least a little bit of an upgrade, but not this little gem. A side-by-side comparison shows there is very little improvement from the 1982 Atari version to the 1988 NES version. The only noticeable change is the ugly green box that looks like Kermit's 5 o'clock shadow around the play area. Atari wasn't exactly known for its dazzling graphics, but there had to be somebody there when they decided to port this game that said, guys, it's 1988 and this game looks like shit, we should probably change that. The concept of the game is subpar, but not the worst ever. It's somewhat appealing that the enemies are bugs, but I don't see why you're controlling what looks like a spaceship. Making you a can of bug spray or something like that would make much more sense. I guess so it all somewhat wraps into some theme, we'll assume this all takes place in space since that is such a rare concept in gaming. The controls were surprisingly pretty good given the fact it was an Atari game. Its simplicity made this easy to accomplish since you only have to move and hit the fire button. They were a tad loose at times and probably cost me some lives, but when I died I felt like it's because I wasn't paying attention, not because the controls, or lack of controls, screwed me over every time. The difficulty of the game is debatable. It gets insanely difficult at a stupid pace. You're really not even warmed up before the crap starts piling on, and there's never really time to take much of a breather. If I was a kid back in the early 80s and put a quarter in this machine, I'd be salty about how quickly I lost all my lives and needed another quarter. I understand that's the point of an arcade machine, but this game is only a step or two above merciless. For some, this instant insane difficulty is desired, but I'm going to give it a low difficulty score because of how it throws you in a blender and grinds you up too quickly. I'm the type of person that doesn't like my games too easy on console, but I like a little bit of a build up to the harder stuff. The music was very simple. It had the little opening jingle and that's basically it. There was some sounds at times beyond the pew-pews, but they were extremely basic. Nothing about the music here will give you that nostalgic fuzzy feeling, and you certainly won't be humming the tune after it's over. The lack of music in-game lets the sound effects get pretty annoying after a few minutes, but that's how it was on the Atari for most games. Overall, this game comes out at a 1.9 out of 5. It falls below the middle of the pack and isn't too far above unplayable. As a collector, I don't think this game is worth owning unless you're a completionist. If you're wanting to play it, there's tons of mobile and online games that are way better and usually free. It's highly unlikely it will ever be put in my system to be played again, and it doesn't stand the test of time and hasn't aged well at all. It's a classic arcade game that will have to stay in the 80s, unfortunately. Do you remember playing this game? If so, tell me about your experience in the comments below. If you have a game you'd like me to grade next, let me know in the comments section or at any of my social media accounts in the description. As always, your viewership is appreciated, and if you enjoyed the video, please show your support by hitting the like button and subscribe to my channel. Happy gaming, everyone, and we'll see you next video. Oh, and by the way, if you know Derek, let him know I have his copy of Millipede and tell that asshole not to write his name in fat black marker on games anymore.